I started working at Angel House about 11 years ago. I, at the time, was doing an in-home daycare. I had two foster children that I was taking care of at the time. They had been with me for a couple of years. And the woman who was supervising their visits with their parents was coming to my house to pick them up, and she worked at Angel House. And as time went on, she said to me, because I was beginning to get tired of doing the whole stay-at-home daycare non-stop, and Angel House was looking for help, and she said to me, you would be really good at Angel House, because my oldest boy was quite a handful, and my youngest boy is on the autistic spectrum, and she just thought I'd be good at Angel House, and I was ready to move on and do something different, so I went over for an interview and got the job. I re-amped in my foster care because I hadn't done it for a long time. So I decided that I would open it up again and open my home to infants. And DSS immediately called me with a little baby that was taken from her mom. She was in the process of detoxing. At that point, they sent them home on meds, usually phenobarbital. And this little baby was on phenobarbital, pretty high dose of phenobarbital. She stayed with me for approximately 4 days, I think. She wasn't with me very long. And then they brought it back to her mom. And they called me shortly after that with a baby. They said to me the baby would be due home probably on, this was a Friday. They said the baby's probably coming out of the hospital on a Monday. And I said, okay, that's fine, you know. They called me an hour later and said, you can pick the baby up at the office. The baby's at the DCF office. You can come and get her whenever you're ready. I said, okay. I did not. I had some stuff for infants. I didn't have a whole lot, even though that's where I was going. It just kind of, that's what happened. So I go to DCF. It's pouring rain, and the baby's brought to my car. Little teeny tiny baby girl. And I immediately went to my friend Christina's house with this little teeny tiny baby. And we took off and did a road trip with her kids and the baby in the pouring rain and bought what I needed, clothes and diapers and formula, because they sent that baby with me with 4 NICU bottles of formula and the clothes on her back. No, maybe there were 10 diapers included in that little bundle. So we went out on this great expedition to gather up the stuff that I might need for this baby. The baby was with me for, I think, that was Friday. The baby nurse came on Saturday afternoon and told me that the baby was doing okay. I felt the baby was breathing rather rapidly. I went to Christina's house at night, and the baby was inconsolable. Just inconsolable. And by 1 o'clock in the morning, I had taken her and met Christina at the hospital and was in the emergency room with this baby for 4 hours because the baby had dehydrated and they couldn't get an IV into her. And she was in full-blown detox, pretty significant detox for this poor little kid. It was pretty horrific. So we were there for 4 hours, and they finally got the baby admitted and stabilized, and I went to work at Angel House at whatever time it was, 7 or 8 o'clock, Sunday morning. And the little girl was in the hospital for approximately 5 weeks with an incredible detox situation. One of the things that you find with a detoxing baby is they sweat profusely. I mean, this little girl would sweat to the point that her clothes, her hair, everything was sopping wet. And the scream of an infant when they're detoxing is a scream you've never heard. It's something that you would not know. It's just, it's ear-piercing, it's horrific, it's extremely painful for the baby. And that's what it sounds like. It sounds like a little teeny tiny baby in pain. And she did this for it went on forever. They were giving her medication to help the detox, to slow the detox down. I mean, to relieve some of the pain and some of those things that she was going through, due to the medication that she's on for the detox, her bowel movements basically ate away the skin on her bum because the medication is so severe. And it was really hard. It was hard for us because the hospital had a different idea about how this baby should have been handled. And as far as I was concerned, and as far as Christina was concerned, that baby needed to be held 24/7. And, you know, we would go in to see the baby and she would be sleeping and they would say, no, don't pick her up. She's sleeping. And at that point in our lives, or at that point in my life, we didn't know that we shouldn't do what they tell us. I mean, if they told us not to, we didn't. And I won't do that again, because if they tell me not to pick up a baby who's detoxing, I'll say, sorry, I know better. I'm picking the baby up. They need to be held. They need to know that somebody's there for them. If we think about ourselves and being in so much pain, and what we want is somebody to recognize us and see us and console us. As adults, we need that. As an infant who's come into the world and has nothing and knows nothing, how can you say, leave that baby lying in a bed and not give her, you know, the warmth of your body? How can you do that to these babies? So that went on for 5 weeks. And that was just the beginning. It was just the beginning. And they had at one point thought maybe that, you know, she was coming down and that it would be okay to maybe take her off the medication they were giving her. And I think they tried that twice, and both times she wasn't quite ready. All the signs of detox, which is the sweating, the screaming, the sneezing, which is very interesting. Sneezing is one of the signs to detoxing, because they don't just sneeze once, they sneeze like 6 to 10 times in a row, which is, yeah, so that's one of the signs for detoxing in an infant. Startle response is extremely high, just kind of jumping out of their skin. So that was, then she came home. You know, when it finally was done and said, and she had spent her 5 weeks there and they slowly weaned her from the medication, she came home. And nobody told me what to expect when she came home. At the time, I didn't know what this baby was addicted to. I knew that methadone was, you know, methadone, quite often when moms are on methadone, you have a detox from methadone in the infants. From what I understand, the detox can vary on methadone. Some babies, so they say don't detox from methadone, and the variation of methadone and the detox that it causes in babies, it varies. It can be a pretty severe detox from methadone. Well, when the baby's in the hospital and detoxing with the medication that she's on, there's not a whole lot else happening with the baby physically. She's struggling to get through it. So all of her energy, all of the baby's energy is going into living through the pain. And there's not a whole lot else. They have no room for anything else in their system. So it's being held, it's being fed, and it's struggling. That's what that 5 weeks is really all about. There's nothing else there. They had volunteers coming in to hold her, and she was on a monitor 24/7 for her breathing. Her breathing was pretty out of control sometimes. And, you know, in all reality, the people at the hospital were great in doing what they were doing. Their understanding of dealing with a child who was detoxing, the doctor that I had was wonderful. But you dealt with individual nurses who just didn't have information on how these things should be handled or whatever, I don't know. So part of it was hard for us coming into the baby. But on the other hand, they did the best they could with what they had and what they were learning, because it was a learning process at that point. I brought her home. I had taken 2 weeks off. I took 2 weeks off of work to be home with her because I didn't know what it was going to be like for her when she got home. And it didn't change a whole lot. I mean, what we saw in the hospital is what we saw at home. Some of the symptoms, the sweating wasn't as bad. It was still there, but it wasn't as bad. The screaming was still there. Probably not quite as piercing, but she spent a lot of time crying because she was an unhappy baby. Her life was painful. And the feeding was a major issue. A lot of babies, since this time, I mean, you see a lot of babies who are detoxing that end up having reflux issues, so that feeding is definitely an issue. And with this little girl, we just did a really slow feeding process. It took 45 minutes to an hour to do a feeding of a couple of ounces at a time because she couldn't handle it. If she handled more than that, then you were looking at somebody who was throwing it all up. So it was a major process of feeding her, burping her, and then after she had finished the couple of ounces, keeping her in an upright position for another 45 minutes so that the milk would stay down in her tummy. And that lasted a very long time in her little life. Because I think she was 6 months old before it actually stopped happening. Because our progress with feeding her was just a really slow piece. She was at 2 ounces, 3 ounces when she came home. And at 6 months, she was at 4. And at about 5 months, we tried to increase it to 5 ounces, and she couldn't handle it. She never did end up having acid reflux, but it took a really long time and a really, really slow process as far as feeding her. And the same with her solid foods. Everything was a very slow process. And that was just her food, because everything was a slow process no matter what it was with this little girl. Her environment, sounds, smells. She started going to, after the 2 weeks was over, and we kind of sort of adjusted to the idea, and Christina and I worked on how our work schedule was going to work and where this little girl was going to go. And we had spent time with Christina so that she wasn't going into Christina's home without having some idea. I mean, we spent a lot of time with Christina and her kids because that was going to be where she was going to be on the days that I had to work. And, you know, the change of the house, the kids. One day Christina decided to put clothes on that Christina had at her house, and she reacted to it. She couldn't handle just having, because it was laundered in different soap, it was whatever. She couldn't handle it. Everything was a very long, slow process. At a very young age, she shut down. She was a baby who would just go into herself. If there were different people, if we were in a different building, if we went to the store, if there, you know, whatever. It didn't, everything and anything shut her down. So everything was a very, very slow process. Yeah, I guess I never looked at it as being mental health, but her emotional, stability and keeping her so that she always felt safe and that we weren't going to ask her to do anything that she couldn't handle. And, you know, as time went on and she got better, we did ask that she work through some of it, and she did. I mean, she turned out, she was a great little kid. But the first 6 months of her life, she really just stayed in that place where she had to take care of herself. And if that meant shutting down and not being out there with everybody, that's what she did. And we just respected that. She needed to do what she needed to do to take care of herself. And as an infant, how many infants get, it's giving that infant that respect, that that's what they need, you know, just to get through it. But it was a tough 6 months, really tough 6 months. I think that with a therapeutic daycare in place, to be able to go into that, to go into a therapeutic daycare and have the information given to you as to what to look for, as to what you would do to be able to read the infant or the child, would have made a big difference. I didn't have anybody in the first 6 months of Angie's life telling me what I was dealing with, except for Christina. Christina and I spent hours on the phone every night talking about what was going on with her and how we should look at it. And to have been given that information or been able to process it with people that had some background in it, it would have been a big difference, a major difference. And for me to go in as a foster parent and to work with somebody in the therapeutic daycare that would work with me and show me, not just tell me, but actually show me some of the positions that are needed for a baby who's detoxing, because you can hold a baby in many different ways, and being able to read a baby, talking about how important it is to keep an infant upright after they're feeding, especially a child who's gone through a detox, but with most babies. So to have something that available to me would have been, it would have just been an incredible experience, just to have something to go to besides myself and Christina. And to have somebody in your life saying, you know what, it's okay. Accept her for where she is and what she's doing. She's doing okay. She's growing. She's, gaining weight. She's getting taller. She's beginning to look at different things in life, and that's okay. Accept her for who she is, and it's all right. And you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. And no, she's not just a fussy baby. She has a reason to be who she is. I think that the therapeutic daycare, the impact would be incredible as far as giving to the child what the child needs. I think that my personal opinion in this situation is that our society forgets that our children are people, and that, the saying is that children are resilient. Well, they are not really resilient. They figure it out. They get through it. But it always comes out somewhere along the line, whether it's when they're a teenager or an adult, whatever, they have to process what they've gone through as a child. And to stop that path that our kids live at a young age, and be able to be with them and let them emotionally heal from whatever the trauma might be. And there are so many ways that a kid can be traumatized. And to have a facility here on the Cape that would allow children to process their trauma, and to allow the parents and teach the parents what it's like for a child to process their trauma and how you read it and how you respect it. I think it's a phenomenal thing. My hope is that it's not the only one. Babies that would benefit from the therapeutic daycare center, we get homelessness, domestic violence, substance abuse, what else? Just about anything. When you think, if we think about, if I can just kind of go off on my own little tangent here, if you think about as an adult, what it's like to lose your job, lose your housing, and lose your loved ones, all within a week's period of time. And where we go as an emotional person, what happens to us emotionally when we have that many losses in our lives, and how we cope with that as adults, as people who have the brain to look at it, process it, figure it out, and move on with their lives after a period of time, because it takes a while to heal from that. If you go back and you look at a kid who has witnessed homelessness, because they've now witnessed their mother and father falling apart, they've had to leave their home and all their belongings most of the time. They've had to leave their friends, they've had to leave their school, they've had to leave all the stuff behind. It's a major, major loss for a child who doesn't have the mental ability to be able to process it, to even say to you, this makes me really sad. 2-year-olds can't tell you that they're really sad, that they've lost all this stuff. 9-month-old They can't tell you that they're really sad, but guess what? They know. They've lost as much as the mom and the dad have, and the kids they don't get acknowledged for their own pain and what they have to go through. And that's true with domestic violence. You know, it's as painful for a baby to be living in a house where there's domestic violence as it is for the woman. I mean, or the husband, whoever's being abused. The kids are living it. It's there. They know it. They feel it. And that, you know, that's the whole scope. Kids can, at any age, and not until they get older can they actually start looking at it and start healing, because it was never given to them at this age. Kids who have to live with parents who are abusing drugs, the same thing. They're there. You know, one of the things that we talk about at Angel House with our women is, you know what? You can think that they didn't know you were using drugs, but they knew. These kids know from a very, very young age. And, you know, people who have had children, you know, one of the things that's always said is, if the mom's having a bad day, you can pretty much guarantee that the kid's going to have a bad day, because our children read us. They know who we are. They know how we're feeling. Whether or not we're verbalizing it, our kids read us. That's true across the board. That's true for all these babies and all these kids that are living in all these situations that causes them trauma. And a child who's been taken from their mom, for whatever the reasons, even if it's the right reasons, that there is abuse or, you know, drugs being used, being pulled from your mother, no matter how horrible it is, as far as the way we look at it, it's trauma for them to be taken away from their mom. So the baby then goes into foster care, and they make a bond with the person that they're with, and we re-traumatize them, because now we put them back with the mom. And so now you've got two, you know, besides the trauma of whatever's going on in the house, now you've traumatized the child by taking them out of the home. You put them back with the mom. You re-traumatize them, because now you've taken them out of a home that they've connected to. So now they're going back with mom in hopes that everything's worked out, in hopes that they're going to be able to stay with their mom for the rest of their lives. That's what our hope is as a community, that we want it to work for them. And it doesn't work. And we take them out of the home again, so we re-traumatize them again. And if you look at some of the situations that I've seen with my boys who I adopted, they have 3 other siblings. My boys came to me and they stayed with me. Both of them had been in 1 or 2 different foster homes before they came to me. Trauma, trauma, trauma. Their siblings, all of their siblings, were in multiple foster homes. How much trauma can one child take? Some of these kids have been in 18, 21 foster homes throughout their lives. And then we want our society to say they're going to be okay, that they're going to be able to have a decent relationship with anybody. How do we give our kids that when we're doing this to them? And to have a therapeutic daycare that starts with them when they're little. If we're going to break the cycle of the abuses that are going on in our society, we have to start with the little guys. You know, it starts when they're young. Allow them to heal when they're little, because that's where it needs to happen. And, you know, I look at my son, my oldest son, who I think was in 3 foster homes, maybe. It may have been just 2. I don't remember. They don't give you all of this information, by the way. You don't get any information. He was a very difficult child throughout his life. At about 8 years old, I think it was, he was diagnosed with nonverbal disorder, which is a disorder which stops you from being able to read facial expression, body language. When you go into a group of people, you don't quite know how or where to put yourself. So he was diagnosed with that. Post-traumatic stress, just because of what he had lived through. So he's dealing with that trauma. And he was a child who came to me at 4 years old, and his inability to connect and bond with me lasted for years. For years. And it wasn't until I was in a situation where I was in the hospital and almost died. He was 16 years old. And he made that connection to me. But he wasn't able to. The trauma that had happened in his life stopped that little boy from being able to feel safe enough to connect with me. No matter what. He had been with me forever. And he was 16. And at 16 years old, he couldn't hug me enough. He couldn't do that as a little kid. Couldn't do it. But he did it at 16. I think having a therapeutic daycare started on the Cape, and the healing process that it would give our families that are on the Cape, and where it would take us as a community on the Cape 5 years down the road, to not only have this therapeutic daycare, but maybe another one set up on Cape Cod, so that the healing process for the families that are struggling and for the children would continue to meet as many needs in as many families as possible. Because there's a lot of families out there struggling for all sorts of reasons. So, okay.
Housing Assistance Corporation has helped over 100,000 people since 1974. In just 1 year, HAC conducted 339 single-family energy audits to reduce electrical use, weatherized 200 single-family homes, provided housing guidance and services to over 5,000 people, assisted 599 households with mortgage foreclosure and reverse mortgage counseling, sheltered 229 families, which included 335 children, served 547 different homeless women and men at the NOAA Center, prevented almost 500 families, including over 1,000 children, from becoming homeless, administered 935 rental subsidies for families, elders, veterans, and disabled clients, paid $8 million in rent annually to landlords, 70% of whom are local, and with the help of over 500 volunteers, served 43,800 meals.